to the DMF. I am your host, Justin Yachts, and today is the continuation of my interview with Tom Ackerman. This is part 4. He is a cinematographer for the films Beetlejuice and Anchorman. Enjoy. So, moving on to George of the Jungle, I've always been curious. Was that always, were the narrations, was that always planned, or was that something that came?
That was always planned, to my knowledge, because many features of the comic book George of the Jungle were translated into what was George of the Jungle, a comic book?
It was like a children's cartoon show that I think
Okay.
Hanna-Barbera.
The goal was to very much embrace the style of the children's book and talk about the language, and the mode of description was very often in that tone. So, but it was always tongue in cheek. But it worked out really well for describing George's kind of arrested development. You know, he hadn't met adult human beings in quite a long time.
Yes, Peter Pan in some ways. It's like that.
Like Peter Pan. He had a hard time identifying Ursula as a female or a being. In any case, he didn't know male, female. What is she? I don't know. She smells good. And of course, how brilliant was Brendan Fraser in playing naivete.
It could so easily have come off like, you know, he's acting instead of, you just buy right into it. Plus, he's very kind in real life. So that like that naivety, you know, kind of plays into how he played it.
Very true. I mean, we had an embarrassment of riches. There was Brendan, our wonderful director, Sam Weisman, an extremely well-educated dramatist, very articulate guy. Our producer, our lead producer, Jordan Kerner. Those guys were so smart about how they approached George of the Jungle, and they enhanced it, and they gave it that comic book tone without losing any of the underlying values.
Yeah, there's a lot of heart to that movie when you look at it, that just, you know, really knows how to hit where it needs to hit. Was John Cleese on set, or was that all done off set?
Trying to think. Because I did another film with him, Rat Race, where he's on camera and he was on set. Yeah. No, I think he was strictly the voiceover guy. But about that time, as I said, we had 3 years earlier, we had moved up to Montecito and got to know John. And at that time, I was so bad I didn't watch television, and I was never a Monty Python fan. Although I knew when friends down in LA heard, "Oh, you're going to dinner with John Cleese?" Wow, you know, they were like flabbergasted. But I just found him to be. I knew he had done all that, by the way, and I would discover working on 2 movies with him that he is an actor without equal, because to play the characters that he has had to play as smartly and effectively as he has done it, that's a tremendous talent. But yeah, John, terrific guy, and you know, we had a lot of fun with John.
Moving on, I watched a little bit of Project Greenlight, season 2, to find. I think you have like one line in there, like in the when they're meeting with you to cast you. I think you say like yes. So I wanted to find what your voice sounded like. I couldn't find any like interviews, so I was like, I found that. I was like, oh, okay, there it is. What was that like?
By the way, what you would want to look at is the scene where they make their decision to hire me.
Yeah, I saw that scene. Yeah,
I think I uttered a few words in that. The overall experience of doing Project Greenlight was fine, was good by me. I got the call. My agent called me. Melanie Ramsayer called from Gersh one day and said, "Hey Tom, there's this Project Greenlight thing that Ben Affleck and his partner are doing. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, let me. I know they had the thing up last season, so let me watch a few of those shows and get a sense of it. But it sounds good to me. It'll time out very nicely with everything else we're doing." I noticed that when I looked at season 1 of Project Greenlight, which had been shot in Chicago, that an above average number of people came off looking not as good as I'm sure they would have liked to look.
Yeah, they're trying to make a TV show. Yeah, so they gotta.
And by the way, anybody who enters a TV show on for any reason, especially one that has the mission of telling the behind the scenes of making a movie, may have to understand that the telling of that story may not come off as you would like it to. And I wasn't naive. I realized what the process would be. At the same time, I felt very comfortable. Well, a certain amount of hubris involved. My crew and myself we will avoid those embarrassing faux pas. My crew and I will avoid those embarrassing faux pas, I thought confidently. And by and large, we did, although a couple of moments that we were just red meat, for pouncing. And one was we were shooting a scene where Shia's Jeep bounces down a hill and goes out of control and goes into a ditch. It's not a big or hits a fence post. It's a pretty small stunt as stunts go. And it was performed by a certified driver, stunt person. We were covering it with 3 cameras, I think. And oftentimes when you're doing multiple cameras, you have one wide shot of the action, which is like a safety, if you will. It shows kind of like all the information that is involved in this activity. The medium shot is often the money shot because it'll be panning and tilting, following, in this case, the Jeep, and it'll have more impact because it's a bigger image. Then you might throw in a third angle with a very long telephoto lens. And I didn't have one, but if I had had a third camera, it would have been, okay, now this is going to be tough, but just follow Shia, stay with Shia throughout. It's going to be a lot of focus tricks and a lot of things. Just go for it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Well, it so happened that the B camera, the medium shot, was obviously the best. It had the best action, the best image size. We watched it back on the from the video tap, so all is well. But two things laid the groundwork for a potential disaster. Number one, the AD rolled the cameras, A and B camera, rolled them. And then there was some conversation about what was going to happen. Somebody needed to, how do we know if they're going to go left? And they're going to go left. Got it. Okay. There's a lot of external conversation about the action from maybe the AD and the stunt coordinator. I don't recall. Point is, time is lapsing. And it so happened that the roll of film in the B camera was getting shorter and shorter. And had we had that much film in the magazine when they started the take, it would have been, it would have been reloaded. It was too little, too much margin of error. Anyway, down the Jeep goes, really worked great. And cut, and our B camera assistant came up to me and said, Tom, I'm so sorry. Her face was like green. Yeah. What? I don't know if we got it. Because I could hear the film flip inside the camera after the roll ran out, and I just don't know if we got it. So that was not good news. But what are you going to do? We had to wait until the lab processed the film, and we would be told that next morning about the dailies.
Yeah.
But needless to say, all the principals were not happy. They went home very worried about what was going to be the case. We found out. Oh, and by the way, once the cameras from Project Greenlight sensed that there was something wrong, they just vectored in, now lenses and
This is it. We got we got something here.
So in addition to being worried about having potentially lost the shot, the first AC on the V camera, wonderful woman, Linda Gasco. I mean, one of the best I've worked with. And she'll be proven to come out on top. So that's why I'm using her name. But they were just all about getting us talking about it. And the next morning, needless to say, after I had seen the shot and been told by the lab that it was everything was fine, the camera guys were kind of in a little gaggle over the side of the set. I said, you two come with me. And I'm going to be talking to Linda now. So, they think, oh, this is where the juice comes, So they cameras up and on and in a follow mode, got to her, and whereupon I was delighted to tell her, great shot, everything's fine. And so their hope of a denouement, a tragic denouement, was thwarted.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I gotta imagine that's gotta be, you're trying to get the shot and you're going through, and then here we go. Here comes the crew.
Yeah.
Stuff. You said they were relatively new filmmakers. They had done a lot of shorts, but overall, you were impressed with those directors.
I was. They did a very, very good job. And pressure, needless to say, on any given day, they would be the topic. They would be the main subject of the fishing for mistakes. They, it's not, if you are shooting that much of two guys doing a job of this size for the first time, you're going to come up with some less than praiseworthy moments. You just are.
Yeah.
But by and large, they did a wonderful job. I think they made a good movie. And if you look at it, the Battle of Shaker Heights, you have to ask yourself, if you didn't know that this had been made in 20 days with a Project Greenlight, under the Project Greenlight umbrella, would you still like it?
That's a good point. Okay, so moving on to Anchorman, Legend of Ron Burgundy. That's Adam McKay's film. How was that?
Working on The Legend of Ron Burgundy had to be one of the best experiences ever. Certainly the funniest film that I've ever, day after day. The biggest challenge was, God, I don't want to go to set and laugh out loud during a take. That was like the occupational hazard that you worried about. Adam had asked, it wasn't on my radar, but it was a project that Gersh suggested I might want to meet with Adam, the director. So so I'd never met Adam McKay. I knew that he had been the head writer at Saturday Night Live, and that very highly in my book. I met him after a day's work, went down to his hotel on Sunset Boulevard, and we hit it off. I think when a meeting has gone well, when you meet somebody that you like, communicate with, having nothing to do with film, it, right? It's not a arcane secret, it. And the fact is that Adam laid it out so clearly what this was about, and the stylistic goals involved, one of which was lampooning the 70s and 70s TV, which I could remember quite clearly at that point. I just had a sense, great, I'm in. Went to a meeting a couple of days later with Judd Apatow, who was the overall producer.
So Judd, okay, so he did produce that. I forgot. Yeah.
Judd Apatow, very talented guy. And also very, how would I put it, very willing to share his points of view, whether very frank, very open, a very frank and open Judd Apatow. And so when I went for the second meeting on the project, Adam was there, and Shauna Robertson, the line producer. And first time I'd met Shauna and Judd, who proceeded to open the meeting in this way. I come in and he's reading. So, Tom, it's like you've done a lot of movies in cold weather. Yeah, I have. Like sort of like, and that's why would you do that? Really, that was
it's almost like a scene in a film.
It was almost a scene in the film. Yeah. And it put me a little bit at ill at ease, really. Yeah. I mean, what do you say? Yeah, well, you're right.
I'm a cold weather aficionado.
Yeah, I love the cold. It's so much fun to wear a down jacket under a huge parka and freeze your ass off in Manitoba, northern Manitoba. Doesn't get any better than that, Judd. Now, what do you really
know? Yeah, exactly.
He's a very talented man, though, and a very nice man. He was extremely supportive throughout the film, the making of Ackerman. And Adam walks on water, as far as I'm concerned, as Will Ferrell.
What was Will like? He strikes me as somebody who's very he knows what the joke, he knows where the laugh is going to be, he knows where everything's going to be. So it's almost like he's doing it systematic. Is that a fair assessment of him, or is he somebody who's intuitively doing it?
No,
coming up with it on the spot.
I don't think it's fair to say that he knows where. I shouldn't say any skilled comedic act has a pretty good sense of where the jokes are going to work, or they wouldn't be performing them. And because of that knowledge, they also know or have a very high expectation that there are going to be laughs. I think Will, in looking at his body of work across the spectrum of what he's done, there's hardly any funnier guy on the screen. And he's played lots of different kinds of characters. It's because he's got that sense of what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. That's
kind of what I mean, things that he did in Anchorman that were pretty out there, frankly. They worked. And his intuition was invariably, his and Adams, it was invariably on the nose.
Is it true that film, like, you guys had an original narrative and then you guys kind of changed it in reshoots?
Well, I don't know if you're talking about this. Did you know that there was a second, essentially Anchorman 2 that came out of outtakes?
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because one of the ones that I think is hilarious is when they're in the lunchroom and Brick is there and they're like, "What is that you're eating, Brick?" And he's like, "Oh, it's one of those bacon things that I got out of the food basket."
Yeah.
And he's like, "What do you eat? What are those?" That doesn't exist. That's a used coffee filter.
Well, it could have been the R-rated version of the first Anchorman, because I remember we shot that. No, but the one I'm talking about, I think it's called Wake Up. The release title was Wake Up.
Yeah, Wake Up, Romberg. Yeah, and that's in there.
Yeah, okay. But that was shot, well, all of it was shot for the first film, and the whole idea of that the terrorist gang that captures the observatory.
That's like completely out of the original film. I think that was supposed to be in.
The reason was most of that stuff was in the original film, but it just didn't work in that context, and so it wasn't used. And there was a little bit of additional photography at the end in Act 3, making more of the zoo sequence where Ron the cage or jumps into the cage to save the news lady. But that was, and about that stuff, I was up in Vancouver working on another film when they did that zoo stuff. But that was necessary to kind of finish out the story as it had transformed. making the news team the entire arc of Anchorman. Meanwhile, a few months later, Wake Up Ron Burgundy was put together out of almost entirely outtakes.
Is it true when they shot that lunchroom scene that, like, I don't know, I've heard rumors that, like, they couldn't stop laughing, so you guys couldn't get the close-up takes of them?
I mean, where he's eating.
Yeah, where he's eating like like it looks like a burrito, but it's like cigarettes inside.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, that might well have been true. It was an occupational hazard of shooting almost every day on Ackerman, which was that it's just so damn funny, and the ad libs were great. The biggest challenge for many of us would be to not laugh out loud and wreck a take.
Yeah.
Be sitting over at Video Village, like, choking, literally. Had a great time on that film.
No, and that's what the film looks like. That it looks like you guys had a great time making it, and I think that's why it still stands the test of time today. I mean, people still, you can quote that movie and people know exactly that movie. I always like the shot where you guys are shooting the team. You're kind of like doing like an intro for the newscast. And you're like, basically for the film, you're introducing all the characters, but inside the film, it's the quintessence of, oh, it's the Channel 6 news team. Here they are. I thought that was such a like a little brilliant way to bring them in. They're just all walking straight, and then they have the clip of them like looking at the camera or whatever. And now that you mentioned, like, you're lampooning the 70s and that, that style of opening where they look at they'll show the name and then they'll look at the camera type of thing.
Well, stylistically, that was exactly the 70s, and it was flawless.
What was it like shooting that the big fight with all the news guys?
Good question. What was it like shooting? Yeah. So what was it like shooting the big battle between the news anchors? It was a lot of fun, and it was also extremely rigorous. We had about 65 or 70 shots that we had to get to make that happen, because there are a lot of quick cuts and action pieces. We did have a second unit working on about half of the material that involved just something that didn't involve a lot of performance, but involved a lot of action. But basically, that sequence was very carefully designed. The gags, like, you don't decide at the last minute, okay, and now he gets his arm cut off.
Yeah, no, that has to be planned.
That's not a last minute decision.
Prop department, come on, get it.
Yeah,
we need a hand.
Yeah, well, now he gets thrown across the parking lot and impacts the car windshield. Again, not likely to happen on the spur of the moment. So there's a tremendous amount of planning, stunt work, and performance. And there are certain moments, I can't remember, I've got all the script versions, I really got to check this out. When the news teams are confronting one another across the tarmac.
Yeah.
And it's so arch, and people glaring, and
it's like a Western. You're kind of go for that like Western.
And then normally, okay, well, it's like you got the wild bunch over on this side and the other group, but they're tossing back the barbs, right? The insults and so forth, back and forth. And you see that I forget how many, there were 3 or 4. No, there were 3 news anchors from the other stations, and they got their clubs and knives, and they're getting ready to go. And then you cut to back to Will and Champ, and all the his channels people.
Yeah.
And then you're going to the dramatic shot down to where the weatherman would ordinarily be. And
Yeah.
and they look over, he is, because he's a simpleton, he's wandered across. Now he's
yeah. Oh, he's on the other side.
He's on the other side. He didn't even know he did it, but he just seemed.
They just pull him back over. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, the fun begins.
Yeah. No, such an interesting. Yeah. No, that had to be meticulously planned, because it's a lot of shots and it's a lot of visual stuff that can't But I thought you guys executed it perfectly. I got to also say, Adam McKay, in some of his more serious stuff, he has shown that he can do both. I like that he can also blend the two in a way that doesn't feel. I really like The Big Short. I mean, he's dealing with something that's really personal to people, 2008 crash, but he's brought this levity to it so that, it doesn't just feel like it's same thing with Vice, with Christian Bale, where it's like, this could just be this, very morose film. And it's like, no, he brought the comedic stuff to it, and just, that also Steve Carell in that movie, he did such a good job. Just here you see him as Brick, and then you see him in that where he's playing I forget his name, Donald Rumsfeld. He's just the way they would introduce him. He's hitting the microphone on the desk.
Yeah,
it's such an interesting. All right, so moving on. You also worked with Albert Brooks a lot. You did The Muse and Looking for Comedy in the Muslim World. How was he to work?
Working with Albert Brooks was a great experience. He is one of the funniest men around. He's a brilliant writer, and he makes terrific movies. I remember when I took the first meeting with Albert, and I think it was I had not read the script. That would change on the second project. He would, I'd read it first. But when I first met with Albert, I sat down and I said, I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of yours. You've made some wonderful movies. So what's your process? How do you do that? Thought for a moment, and he said, well, it's like this. When the performance is right for me and the photography is right for you, move on to the next shot. And that was pretty much how he approached filmmaking. He was not an obsessed visualist. He knew what constituted good scene coverage and good photography. He was a big fan of photography. But if he liked what the actors did, and I liked what the light and the camera did, then we'd have it. We would not shoot that any longer.
Interesting. So he would just he was like, okay, we got it. We can move on, type of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The second film that I did with Albert was Looking for Comedy in the Muslim World, which ultimately took us to India for about 5 weeks of shooting, 4 or 5 weeks, I don't remember. And Albert was the guy who really didn't fancy leaving his house, it seemed to me. He wasn't one of these guys who relishes being in the public eye.
Yeah.
He was not introverted, or, what's the word for somebody who doesn't like to go outside?
Introvert?
No, there's something even, there's a syndrome. People who refuse to leave their house. It's not.
Oh, Stockholm Syndrome?
Maybe, I don't know. Point is, let's put it this way. When I learned that we were going to be shooting in the center of New Delhi, India, on this one particularly important scene, with probably hundreds of our own extras that had been hired and thousands of other interested parties, you can't go to India and feel that you'll ever be outside without being surrounded by a lot of people. That does not exist. So and that didn't quite. I thought, well, geez, I've never known Albert to like. I've never known Albert to be one who liked to be in that kind of a compression situation with a bunch of people. You know what? We got there, we got to shooting that scene. He was great.
Yeah.
And he was Albert Brooks in New Delhi. It was
I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that film was a tremendous opportunity to see him working really out of his element and taking some big risks.
Yeah.
Another scene. Have you seen the movie?
I haven't seen the movie, but I remember kind of when it was coming out. I was kind of like, wow, that's kind of interesting. Comedy in and yeah, in the Muslim world. It's not really right for comedy there.
Well, he does such a brilliant job, and he takes risks. I mean, there's a scene which was actually shot back in L.A., as were some scenes on sets. But on this one, we shot on location, I think at a lecture hall at UCLA, one of the colleges, and he was addressing. We got hundreds of extras, and supposedly this is a lecture on comedy that he is giving to an Indian audience. And the whole purpose of the scene, the whole purpose of the scene was clearly to show the disconnect between his expectations as an American writer and comedian and what that audience is going to respond to. But he's brave enough to take the risk, looking for comedy in the Muslim world. Yeah. And he bombs. Now, here is a very funny man who the purpose of the scene was to fail, embarrassingly. And you can see him try to pull himself out of that, manipulate the material, somehow structure a couple of lines that are going to work. And by and large, the character doesn't. Albert Brooks is like really on that stage taking a lot of heat. And I thought that was incredibly brave to allow a scene to kind of fizzle out because, which is of course so you want to know why Western sensibilities can't just be glued on to another culture? Well, there it is.
Interesting. So if you talk to most stand-up comedians, like a lot of them are afraid to fail, bomb there. And here he is writing that scene and then living through it. But I mean, you look at, broadcast news where, he's, he's sweating all over and everything. So, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like he's going back to that. He reminds me a lot of like kind of Woody Allen, where they're not afraid to put themselves in a way to look bad. Whereas a lot of them kind of, it's not that they don't necessarily look bad, but like he's not afraid to be the bad guy or to be the one that takes, take the brunt of the beating, It's very, very funny. Personal.
The funny scene that counters that, however, is his character's hubris is such that now he's actually going to go into a Pakistani border, into the Pakistani border territory and meet with some tribal leaders around a campfire at night. And these guys are all sitting there in their robes and pretty stone-faced.
Yeah.
And again, it's not going well. But he then kind of breaks the ice. He sort of, they're not rolling in the aisles or anything like that, but
they draw a smile.
Yeah. Whether they think that this American is a novelty of some kind, they at least they know he's not a CIA plot. I keep suggesting films to you, but I think you would find this one a good one to watch.
The looking for the comedy in the Muslim world.
Looking for comedy in the Muslim world.
I will definitely watch it. I remember it coming. I think it's probably more applicable today now, because now we're in this era of comedy that I don't think we've ever been in, where it's like, unfortunately, comedy is going to offend somebody. But now we're in this age where it's like people don't want to, like it used to be, something might offend you, but you're like, I'm going to let it go. Now it's like, I'm offended. I'm going to raise hell about it. And it's like, how are we supposed to do comedy then? Now you have to put everything through this prism of, is this going to offend somebody? And it's like, sometimes that's what's needed. Look at George Carlin. He talked about, going up to the line and going over it and then bringing you back. And he'd say, see, it wasn't so bad. We went over the line, just to find where that line is. And to me, that's always what the braveness of a comedian to do is when they go try to do those things. Now it's becoming harder than ever. Person who did The Hangover, he said, today it'd be very hard to do The Hangover because comedy sensibilities have changed. So I think, looking for comedy in the Muslim world is very applicable to kind of where we are now, because now we're kind of like that, where it's like, you can't, it used to be, comedians could go to these clubs and test things out without fear of offending somebody. Now everybody has a phone. The second you say something bad or something that somebody doesn't like, it's immediately. Now we have people who will go up on stage and chastise the person that is doing the comedy, where I don't think we've ever really had that before, like to that point. Now, a good comedian can, bring those people down. I think it was, Louis C.K. talks about how when Larry David would first start out, he would get mad at the audience at everything. So, what are you doing? You're not doing it. And he Louis in the back of his mind would be like, they're actually a good audience, but he would just heckle them mercilessly. It's just funny.
All right, David, how great is he?
His show is just, when you look at a show like that, I mean, he took the idea of Seinfeld and brought it to this like documentary style show of his life, and then expanded on that. And now he's almost probably done more shows than he did with Seinfeld. But it's I mean, he's somebody who could just take something so mundane as like cutting in line and make that into something that's super funny, and then comes back around into an arc.
Yeah. Well, yeah, look, he can have a scene where he goes and orders a pastrami sandwich at a deli, and that will become a riot,
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes, he's talking to Ted Danson. He wants him to switch sandwiches with him. It could be just this.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It could be just this throwaway scene. And, he starts, he's like, okay, well, what's in the sandwich? He starts telling him. And, now Ted Danson's offended that he doesn't like the sandwich. And then Larry gets offended because he's offended because he won't switch the sandwiches. And it's the funniest thing. Just something so mundane. It's just
let me just say one quick thing before I forget about the experience of working with Albert Brooks. I will always be grateful for. 2 movies, each audacious and risk-taking and funny as hell. And Albert was at the center of every one of them. And he made those movies not to do something ordinary, but something to start rattling the cage in a certain way.
Yeah.
It was such a pleasure being able to work for him and doing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you look at, he was one of the original like recurring guest voices on The Simpsons. And I think it's, James L. Brooks, I think, has said that, he's probably one of the best improvisationalist actors he's seen, because he just can, take this character they give him and come up with all these funny quips and everything. So I believe that. I mean, even look at some of his acting work, like a film like Drive.
Oh my God, I was going to mention that. He was scary in Drive.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
He said the director didn't want him to do it, so he grabbed him after the audition to show him that he could be scary. And it's like that's something that like no one thought he would, he's in Taxi Driver, but he plays kind of like a comic foil kind of, or Sybil Shepherd's character. Here he is. He's like the villain, but he's a very convicted villain. And he was so interesting in that film.
He was so pathologically hazardous to your health in that movie. It was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, he just
Um,
yes, such a
did
Okay, that about does it for part 4 of my interview with Tom Ackerman. I want to thank Tom for his time. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, you can find me at Justin Yachts. Please like, share, and subscribe, and consider checking out the YouTube channel. And I will see you next time on the DMF.